Hi, I'm James. Welcome to Slaying Sober, where we tell stories of addiction, recovery, and hope. Wherever you are on your sober journey, know that you do not stand alone. A quick heads up before we dive in. Slaying Sober episodes get colourful, sweary, and real about drug use, wild nights, and the messy road to recovery. We share a powerful message of enlightenment and hope in an entertaining style that we hope lifts you up. But at times we get deep and touch on themes such as suicide and idealisation of chaos. If that's too heavy for you right now, take care of yourself first and come back later. We're here for honest stories, not to trigger. Listen when you're ready, and thanks for your support of Slaying Sober. Hi, it's James here. Today's episode was filmed in high definition and is available both on video and audio on Spotify, as well as on YouTube, so you can listen or watch in high definition. Please enjoy. Today, I have another cracking episode for you. Today's guest is Joe. He grew up in Melbourne in the 70s, an Italian kid who copped racism, abuse, and relentless bullying. We hear a brutal story of humiliation at the hands of school bullies that left him bloodied, battered, and eventually suicidal from shame and pain. It was at this point when he considered death that he chose vengeance. Joe unleashed the monster inside to survive. He found belonging in a place where they valued aggression and the ability to hurt people. Amphetamines, steroids, bikie runs, and bouncing doors, he was feared on the streets, and he could go from 0 to 100 really fast. But that monster had to come home, and he realised that he had become what he always feared in his own father. He knew he needed to change. Joe channeled this anger in the right ways, through martial arts, weights, stoic self-control, and he turned his life from chaos into balance. In today's episode, we hear Joe's insights about the power of change and forgiveness. Today, Joe is an AOD teacher, a mental health warrior, a strength and martial arts coach, and is living a balanced life that helps others tame their rage and reclaim their purpose. Let's get stuck in to Joe's story. Joe, welcome to Slaying Sober. Lovely to meet you.
Pleasure, James. Absolute pleasure.
Usually I know a fair bit about my guests, but I've been referred on to you by a couple of our previous guests, and I don't know a lot about your background. So do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Pleasure. Well, firstly, maybe I better tell you what I do. I actually currently teach in the AOD course at a government institution. So I teach people to be AOD workers, support workers, mental health workers, that sort of stuff. And I provide counselling on the side, people dealing with addiction. Yes. I also am a personal trainer, a strength specialist, martial arts teacher. So I use martial arts weights to help people deal with their inner demons.
Perfect.
Their uncontrollable emotions sometimes. You know? So yeah.
Out of a gym?
Yeah. I've got a number of friends who own gyms, and I'm able to run programs from there. So yeah.
Excellent.
I did have a gym many years ago called Joe's Gym.
Where was that?
In Fentry Gully.
Okay.
A long time ago, back in the early 80s.
So you have a martial arts background?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yep. What format?
Judo. I started out in judo. So, I did quite well in judo and boxing. My old man was a boxer. So, yeah. So that, that was a modality that I resonated with and helped me overcome my issues.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Okay. Where did you grow up, Joe?
I grew up in outer eastern suburbs. I don't want to be too specific, but the outer eastern suburbs of Melbourne,
And what?
I'm Italian, so I grew up in a little Italian community. My parents arrived here in the 50s,
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So they were migrants and they came over looking for a change of life.
Yeah, well, the ravages of World War II.
Yeah.
And, make a new start and a new life for themselves. But my old man, unfortunately, got a job on the docks. He's already a little bit of a rat bag.
Okay.
Very much got into the Aussie culture, the drinking culture.
Yep.
Going to the pub before going to work in the mornings on the docks,
Wow.
So he was a dock worker and he was a boxer. So
he was a colourful character.
he was a colourful character, yeah.
Okay.
I do remember him spending a bit of time inside when I was a young fellow at school. So that was my role model. So, yeah.
And what was that like for you as a child?
It was tough. It was tough. In those early days, we weren't accepted being a wog, They called us Dagos in those days, We weren't accepted. We were seen as different. We smelt different as well,
Okay.
Obviously, the garlic
The
would come out of the
foods.
pores of my skin, and the kids at school wouldn't want to hang out with me and say, you stink, So, yeah, we were an unknown quantity, We were very much about maintaining our identity, but also being part of the culture and assimilating. But I was born here just after my parents arrived, and I was caught between two worlds.
Yes.
I was neither an Italian, but I was neither an Aussie.
Yeah.
The Italians, would refer to me as an Australiano.
Yes.
And of course the Aussies wouldn't accept me as an Aussie, but as a wog,
Yeah.
When I had hair, it was quite dark.
So you were between two worlds, struggling to find your own identity.
Sense of identity. And of course I had a tendency to gravitate towards, those who were rebels. I couldn't speak English when I went to school. I struggled with reading and writing. I seemed to be plagued with a learning disability, ADHD, which wasn't diagnosed. I couldn't keep still.
Yep.
I couldn't focus. So I got labelled a dumbass, by my fellow students. But in time, I morphed into a badass.
Yeah.
Because it was better to be seen as a badass than a dumbass.
Yeah.
And of course, getting involved into groups that were into heavy drinking. I sort of very quickly resonated with the Aussie drinking culture.
Yep.
And partaking of certain substances.
Yes. So how old were you at this point?
Late teen, mid to late teens.
Yeah.
And
that helped you assimilate into and feel welcome and part of.
Well, I felt I couldn't cut it in the mainstream culture. I wasn't academic. I wasn't very good at playing footy.
Yep.
But there were a couple of things that I could do, and I could do well. I could fight,
Yeah.
and I could go from naught to 100 within seconds, And I also like to, push boundaries. And so those things held you in positive regard to certain individuals.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. So that's where you found your people in violence and crime in ways.
Yeah. I began to associate with groups of individuals and organisations that were engaged in nefarious activities. And so, us Italians, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but we have a tendency to break rules, or bend and do some dodgy things. So, I found my people in a sense,
Yep.
It's very important for people, for human beings, all of us to be accepted, to be valued and appreciated. But all of us need to bring something to the table.
Yes.
And what I brought was, recklessness, aggression, the ability to hurt people.
Yeah. And that was utilised within the people that you were hanging out with.
Yeah, definitely. Look, as I grew up, I wasn't academic at that point in time. So, like a lot of Italians, I took up concreting. I became a good concreter.
Yeah.
A little bit of, working on building sites and of course of an evening doing bouncing.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
So I needed something to keep me going, because often I'd be working until the early hours of the morning, and then I'd have to be on a job site within 2 hours, concreting, working my butt off.
So you were using substance to help you?
Yeah. Very quickly I learned that there were certain substances that would give me a tremendous amount of energy and boost. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. And you were using them problematically?
Well, at the time, it was for functional reasons.
Yep.
I never saw that I had a drug problem.
Yeah.
It was I was just using something to give me a little bit of a
performance enhancement.
Yeah, a boost. In those days, anything that'd give me a boost, in some way, I'd take it.
Yeah.
But then I needed something to bring me down, because I couldn't switch off.
Yeah. So how did that look?
Well, oscillating between, being manic
up.
and then just being down. And I hated being down. So I'd always have to take something to boost me up, So
and were you training at this time
I was doing a lot of fighting. I was, it wasn't, lifting weights, that sort of stuff, because as a bouncer, and I did quite a bit of bodyguard work for certain businessmen.
Individuals.
Yeah.
Colourful identities.
Yes. So I needed to, be on top of my game. I needed to be able to deliver when the shit hits the fan, so to speak. And drugs at the time were not a problem. So I thought.
Yes.
I didn't see myself as having a drug problem. It was assisting, with the work that I was doing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a problem. I was a functional drug user until it no longer worked. It became problematic,
And how did that look?
Well, my emotions, my inability to control my emotions, it began at this point in time. I was married, I had 3 little kids.
Yeah.
And, working on building sites, doing bouncing at night, coming home early hours of the morning, being agitated, being on edge, very snappy. It all went to shit.
Yes.
And it eventually, my addiction is what destroyed my relationship. But I think a pivotal moment was when I was very substance affected. I was having an argument with my partner and I just lost it. I remember, destroying the place. I remember just doing idiotic things. Like I remember, picking up the fridge and throwing it out the back door in rage. I mean, who does that kind of shit,
Well, someone very strong.
Yeah. And I remember, my wife at the time had bought this antique dining table, which she loved, and I was sort of fixing it up. And in my rage, I remember smashing it to pieces with my fists. And it was a moment there where she's screaming, she's yelling. The boys, were in their room, but my daughter was in the kitchen at the time. She was probably 7 or 8. I remember seeing her in the corner of my eye, and this was a pivotal moment for me. I saw her in the corner, huddled up, her knees, she was cuddling her knees, she was in a crouched position. She had her arms around her knees and she was crying and she was saying, "Daddy, please stop, please stop, you're scaring me, you're scaring me, you're scaring me." And in that moment, I realized that I had become the monster in my daughter's dreams, as my father at one point had become the monster in my dreams because of his addiction, his inability to control his rage, excessive drinking. I also had that propensity to drink excessively, I either stayed away, but when I wasn't feeling well or when the relationship wasn't going well, I'd always hit the bottle. And then I'd need something to pick me up, I'd go find something else. And
where did that anger come from?
Trauma. If I rewind a little bit, when I was probably 4 or 5, I can't remember the exact age, prior to going to school, my parents both had to work and they left me in the care of neighbours. Yeah. And the neighbours had an elder son who's, I don't know, late teens, early 20s. And, he did something to me that should never happen to a little kid. And so that was fairly traumatizing. He did that both to me and his little stepbrother.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was pretty horrible. So there was a lot of rage and hurt. So what happened? Something inside of me broke, Yeah. It was almost like a disassociation. When you've been traumatized as a kid, a lot of the the people that I work with and the counselling I provide, like I've done work in prisons and rehabs, and I notice a lot of the men that I work with are also victims of some sort of trauma.
Yeah.
So the alcohol and the drugs helped deal with that. Sometimes I couldn't handle it. I'd have to block it out. So also, when I was I think year 7, my first welcome when I went to high school, I was welcomed with a hospital visitation.
Right.
Apparently, I was mistaken for the brother of some other wog who'd beaten up one of the heavies in the school. I think I was in year 7, and a bunch of year 9 boys beat me up, and hospitalised me, dislocated my arm, knocked out my tooth, broke my nose, cracked my occipital lobe, beat the living crap out of me.
Oh, jeez, that's a fair beating.
Yeah, and to add salt into the wound as I was a mess on the ground. They booted me and I was covered in blood. One of the guys decided it'd be fun to just piss on me.
Oh, God.
Can you imagine that?
It's like humiliation.
Yeah. I'd only been at the school a few months, so total humiliation.
Oh, man.
Humiliation.
Kids can be so fucking cruel, can't they?
Definitely. And several months later, I think it took me 6 months to finally go back to school. Right? I was hoping that people would forget that.
Yeah,
but they hadn't.
Oh, man.
And so people would say, "Hey, does anyone smell piss?" And they'd laugh. You got pissed on. So I guess 2 years later, I couldn't cope with the humiliation. Going back to the trauma that happened as a kid, and now this additional, so two traumatic events.
Yes.
Right? The abuse as a child, right, and then the bashing, the horrific bashing. So I became an easy target. See. When I was hurt, when I was abused as a child, what happens? You something splits inside of you. It's like I had a dissociated personality disorder. There was this quiet, submissive, gentle, scared little rabbit, like little wog boy that was scared and very compliant. But there was also something lurking deep inside, like a monster that hadn't yet emerged.
Yeah. That's a really interesting way of putting it.
Yeah, I did notice that because what had happened. Around 2 years later, like you imagine, you're seen as an easy target. So I'd go to school every single morning, and I'd have to steal money to pay people to stop me from from being bashed.
Yeah.
But they still bash me anyway.
Yeah.
They come and slap me. Where's our money? Where's our money?
So
you imagine that.
Yeah.
2 years of that. I copped 2 years of that. I would always hide, but they'd always find me. They'd always hide me. So what happened at the end of year 8, I couldn't cope with this anymore. So I remember I reached a point where I thought, I can't cope. I can't live with myself. I can't live with this abuse. I want the pain to stop. So what I did, in not far from the Dandenongs, there are quite a number of quarries. So I went to a quarry, a well-known site for a lot of young people at that point in time. And I went to a spot where I think 3 or 4 people had fallen from that spot and died already,
Okay.
Through misadventure, I assume. And I remember going to the edge of that cliff. I was literally on the edge, toying with the idea of throwing myself off because I wanted the humiliation. I wanted the abuse to stop.
Yeah.
Right? So I was teetering on the edge, and I wanted to throw myself off so the pain would end. There was so much despair, I felt, it was better to end it than to continue to endure the pain, right? So in that moment, it's like I don't know, I had this strange sort of daydream, I saw my own funeral. I saw like my coffin being lowered into the ground, and I saw all these kids that originally had beat me up, because there's quite a few of them, and they were throwing rubbish on my coffin and pissing on it as it was being lowered into the ground. I saw my father walking off in disgust. I saw my mother crying. Now, I'll rewind a little bit to give you a context of my 2 parents at the time. Now, as I indicated, I got beat up pretty bad as year 7, right? And they were just laying into me, kicking me in the face, in the ribs, and I couldn't protect myself because my arm was dislocated, and I couldn't, I was on the ground, and someone's pissing on me. Horrific humiliation. I know people have been through worse, but for me, that was a low point in my life. But I remember in that moment, I heard someone yell and say, "You fucking leave him alone." And it was an older boy, a year 10 boy. He was built like a brick shit house, you know. Everyone knew him, you know.
Yeah.
And he told them to piss off. And he held me up. He goes, "Fuck, you're a mess, man." And in that moment, I remember thinking, I wish I was you.
Yeah.
No one would mess with you, you know? And I remember he held me up and he goes, "Fuck, man, you're a mess." And he took me to the office. You know, this was after school. There were still teachers in the office, right? But he wasn't going to go in. That wasn't his jam, you know?
Yep.
And as he walked off, I remember thinking, in one sense, there was a spark. There was something about him that gave me hope in humanity. And I thought, I wanted to be like him. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got this arm that's all twisted in a strange angle. I'm covered in blood. I'm smelling like urine, right? And the nurse sort of, thought I'd wet myself.
This is beyond my pay grade.
Yeah. So she wanted me to lay down. I couldn't lay down. I was in so much pain. So I'm sitting on the edge of the bed and she's trying to tend to my wounds and clean me up and fix up my broken nose and bloody teeth because the tooth had been knocked out, right? And the school called my parents, right? So my parents turned up. Dad was on, he was home because he did night shift. And Mum was a dressmaker. She was home. She'd make clothes for all the Italian ladies, right? So Mum and Dad turn up. My mother sees me, typical Italian lady. "Oh, my boy, it's my boy." She starts, lamenting and crying, And my father comes up, stands over me while I'm on the bed, and he shook his head. And he said, "You're a disgrace." In Italian, he goes, "You're a disgrace to the family name. You don't deserve to be called Ozzolo." And he gave me a backhander. Already my face was broken, and he gave me a backhander.
Man.
There's a bit of a story about that something similar happened to him, and that's what his old man did to him. It was his way of saying, "Don't fucking cry, kid."
Yeah.
Don't disgrace me any further. Because at that point in time, he was a bare knuckles fist fighter on the docks. Do you know he was respected on the wharves?
Yeah.
He was one tough man.
Yeah.
He'd already spent some time inside, and he felt I was a little bit of a girl, because I had a sort of a gentle side, and because of the abuse, I had become.
So there's obviously so much to take in there.
Yeah.
But take us back to the edge of the cliff. And
Okay,
what
that's where I'm going.
there.
All right, so while I'm there, as I said, I saw my father shaking his head and walking off in disgust. I saw my mother crying. And it's like I hear this voice in my head saying, "Do you want to die a useless death?" And I remember responding and saying, "No." So I chose a path. It wasn't necessarily a good path at that point in time, but it was a path nevertheless.
You chose to live.
I chose to live, but I chose vengeance.
Yeah.
I chose vengeance, right? And I realized that I needed to train. I needed to get these people back. So that began my journey and my foray into breaking the laws. I didn't give a shit anymore.
Were you inspired by that big guy?
Yeah, I wanted to be like him. He was one tough mother. You know what I mean? He was a bit of a hard ass.
Yeah.
I kept track of him. He eventually rode with a motorcycle club.
Yeah, okay.
Who I eventually got to hang out with too.
So you really followed his path.
I followed his way, and I began to enter this dark world, but I needed to prove myself.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a long story. I won't go into it, but eventually I reached the top of the heap.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I was in my late teens, early 20s. I became feared and respected because what I noticed, I talked about a disassociative personality.
Yeah.
I remember choosing to unleash that monster. And so whenever I was confronted with aggression, I would unleash the monster. But of course, drinking with the various and the drugs brought that monster
to the surface.
Very easily. And I enjoyed the power that it made me, or that it gave me, and it made me feel invincible.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you start to drink,
yeah,
or you start to take certain substances, certain stimulants.
Yeah.
I felt like Superman.
Yes.
I trained like a mother, Yeah. I took, all the kind of, enhancing substances I could get hold of, At the time, a lot of amphetamines, a lot of steroids, I became a monster.
So you physically and emotionally became that monster.
I became a monster. And of course, that monster was being expressed within my own home because I was losing control. The monster that was growing inside of me as a result of my trauma was impacting on the people that I love. We always hurt the people that are closest to us.
Yeah.
You know, I felt justified by hurting the people that I did. Mm-hmm. You know, I began to ride with a few guys, you know what I mean, and hang out with certain individuals, you know, and we started doing stuff, you know. We started doing stuff. Yeah.
Tell us about that whole experience of being at school, where you were sort of paying protection money, you know, looking up to these bigger kids. It sort of feels like it gave you a bit of an apprenticeship to where you became in your 20s.
Yeah, well, strangely enough, I never hurt those who were victims. Do you know what I mean? I went after the bullies.
Yeah.
That was my thing. I think because I knew what it was like to be victimized. I knew what it was like to be abused. I would always hang out with the nerdy kids, the dorky kids.
Yes.
I mean, I wasn't academic like them. They were all really, you know, quite intelligent. I wasn't. You know, there was some like me. But I understood what it was like to be victimized, to be abused. These guys didn't have the physical presence that I eventually was able to acquire. They had the intellect, but they weren't able to apply that intellect within that space. Eventually, some of them went on and became, you know, engineers, business owners, and you know, and gained power that way, right?
Yeah.
So I know what it's like to feel powerlessness, to feel abused, to feel lonely, to feel despair, you know. And of course, the drugs at the time were really medicinal. They were able to help that. They were able to take me out of that low spot, you know.
And enhance you up to the top of that pile, like you said, where you were in a well-respected amongst certain organisations.
Yes. We crave for identity and validation. Like I said, I couldn't find it within the school sort of curriculum or within, you know, acceptable sort of avenues. So I found it in the darker underbelly, you know, side of life, you know? So, yeah.
Now, you touched on the fact that aggression started to come out of you at home and in front of your family. And it seems that you're mirroring your dad a little bit in those behaviours.
Yeah, very true, very true. I, as much as at that point in time, I loathed my father. But I also respected my father because I feared him.
Yeah.
I remember, Dad used to have all the guys from the docks coming on the weekend or whenever, and they'd be boxing because Dad became a boxing coach, you know.
Yeah.
He's also involved in helping our Lionel Rose in those early days, you know. He used to do a lot of pad work with Lionel, you know. Lionel was about 5 years older than me. I remember going in and watching him train, and Dad would do pad work with him.
Yeah.
Dad's career as a boxer was cut short because he had an accident on the docks and smashed his leg. So, but he was quite a formidable boxer.
Fighter.
Italians are good with their hands.
Yeah.
Not good kickers, but good with their hands, you know. And he was as tough as iron, you know. He was as tough as iron. But he also had this propensity for anger and this ability to to not stop. When he drank, he didn't stop, you know. And I also had that sort of addictive personality. So I realized that I was like my father in that when I did something, I really give it everything, you know what I mean? Whether it was taking certain substances or drinking drinking, I'd always take it to excess. Same with my training. I'd take it to excess, whether it was boxing, martial arts, weight training. I just took it to the extreme, do you know?
Yes.
And whenever there was conflict, I'd have to be the one to finish it all, do you know? So you gain kudos and respect. But as I said, the pivotal point was when in the corner of my eye, I saw my daughter in fear, total fear. And of course that violent outburst eventually caused the neighbours to ring the police, and, you know, it just all got out of hand, you know.
Yeah.
So I lost access
to
the children, visitation rights, all that sort of stuff, you know. Look, their mum was awesome.
Yeah.
She wasn't the problem. I was the problem.
Yes.
She had no idea that I had this rage, this monster within me, and the drugs and the alcohol just brought it out.
So was that enough to make you change?
That was the beginning.
Yes.
The journey began. You know, I went to counselling. It didn't quite help. I went to AA at the time. And look, there were aspects of AA that really helped, the 12-step program. I realized that what I was dealing with was beyond my ability to cope with. I know AA has you reach a point where you have to acknowledge that you have a problem. I had to acknowledge that I have an addiction issue. I have, a whole lot of issues. And that was beyond my ability to deal with, and I needed something greater than myself. I needed to believe in something other than myself. I needed sometimes that belief in something greater than yourself. It can be, yes, a divine being or whatever, but it can also be your friends, your family, people other than yourself that are able to support you. And I guess there were two pivotal people that helped me in my recovery journey. It was a boxer. Who's my sponsor? He's as rough as nails. He used to say to me, every fucking day above ground is a good day, Joey. And he taught me that our addiction is like an opponent in the ring. So I'll get back to that in a minute. I also had a judo and karate teacher who taught Bushido, which is loosely translated, the way of the warrior. That's what that means.
Yeah, the way of the warrior.
The way of the warrior. The way of the virtuous warrior. So what I began to learn, and I began to see my addiction as an enemy that I needed to conquer, right? It was an enemy that promised everything, but took away everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it promised, relief from pain. It promised energy. It promised happiness, but it was all a lie.
Yeah.
But the problem is I was addicted, and the addiction was very powerful. Every time I tried to stop, I lacked the ability to control my urges. So the urges would come. I stopped drinking, I stopped taking drugs, but I found that I would relapse again and again and again. I did do some time in Italy at a rehab that my cousin paid for me. It's very lovely of him. I went to a place in southern Italy up in the hills. It was at a monastery, and I sort of learned. They taught us mindfulness and meditation, and sort of it was a little bit spiritual, and there were people from all parts of the world, and there were things there that were good. I really enjoyed it. But when I came back, I relapsed again. Yeah. So I realized that I lacked something. I lacked self-control. Okay. I also lacked purpose. Now, as I learned about the way of the warrior, one of the key principles of being a warrior is the question that my instructor would ask: who do you serve? As a warrior, I can use the samurai as an example, right? Or the Spartan warriors, right? The Spartan warriors, who did they serve? They served God, or well, they served their community. Yeah, okay. They served their community. They served Sparta. Yes. They served Sparta. They served their king. The samurai served the shogun or their leader. Do you know what I mean? They needed to know, who they served. So this is what he would say to us: who do you serve? As a warrior, who do you serve? Do you serve yourself and your own desires and your own self-interest, or do you serve the greater good? But first, you need to think more locally. Yes. Who do you serve? Yes. And I realized it's my family. But I had neglected my family. I would just hang out with the boys. I'd get on my Harley and go for rides, hang out with the boys and come back, 2 days later. And my poor wife was left alone. I was always out, riding with the boys. I was always out at the gym. I was always out,
Because you were selfish?
Yeah, I was selfish.
Yeah.
I was very, very selfish because I served myself. When I was asked, who do you serve? The question was, the response to that question was, I serve myself. And I needed to change that. First, I serve my family. Now, at that time, my wife and I had broken up, but I needed to still protect her, to serve her, to help her, because she was a mother and my kids. That was a powerful mindset that my instructor taught me. Don't see her as the enemy, but as a mother of your children. So I also needed to serve the greater good, something greater than myself, to make a difference in the world. Now, part of the 12-step program, of course, is giving back. Service to others. So I needed to focus on my family, and I needed to focus on others who are struggling with addiction, struggling with anger, struggling with their own inner demons that are often their creation as a result of their trauma or their own making or their own thinking. So that's one of the virtues of the warrior. But the other virtue is self-control. How the fuck do I gain self-control? You know, whenever the urge would come, I'd give in.
Yes.
I'd give in, you know. I'd have to take something. I'd have to drink. Or whenever I was dealing with my emotions. So I
self-will?
I learned Stoic protocols in a sense. My instructor taught me certain Stoic protocols to acknowledge that feelings are real, but they are not our master, right? So firstly, to change my attitude towards it, to externalize it, but also to learn to become disciplined. So my physical training and putting myself and living a Spartan lifestyle, in a sense, very Spartan lifestyle, in order to gain self-control. But I put my body under extreme pressure, under extreme pain. I pushed it to the point where it ripped apart practically, you know?
Yeah. Was that punishing yourself?
It was about gaining...
to try and make redemption?
Possibly, but it was also about gaining self-control and realising that emotions can lie to you. Emotions change like the wind. Yeah. So I would, when an emotion came, when an anger, when I felt the urge to hurt somebody because they pissed me off, when I felt the urge to drink to take away, the depression, I began to examine it objectively. It's almost like I looked at it objectively and I was able to quantify it, qualify it, and say it is an emotion. Am I going to let that emotion control my destiny, my path? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because what is the greater good? The greater good is to love my children unconditionally, to love their mother unconditionally, right? And to make a difference in the world. So my goal shifted. I knew what I had to do. Yeah. So I was becoming who I was, because I remember my martial arts instructor said to me, "Who are you?" I said, "Joe." No, who are you really? Yeah. What are you? And I couldn't answer that. And I said to him, "Why is that important?" He said to me, "Because if you don't decide who you are and what kind of man you want to be, you become what others expect of you." What do people expect of you? Well, whenever there's a fight, I'm going to be there to back them up. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
So how does that look for you now on who you want to be now?
I am a protector, right? I've always been a protector. Once you identify, say for example, if you ask someone and you say, "Who are you?" and they say, "Well, I'm a painter or I'm a musician," unless they engage in that activity, they don't feel fulfilled. Some people are builders, so they have to build. Yeah. Okay? Yep. Right? I was a protector. And possibly that formed as a result of knowing what it's like to be victimized and abused by the strong. Those who had power over me abused that power. So there were those who are powerless. So I realized I was a protector. But in order to protect, you can't protect everyone. You can't go around. So when I became a bouncer, I didn't go after the innocents. I went after the bullies. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yep. I became very observant, and I realized who the bullies were. And I took great pleasure in taking them down and humiliating, particularly the ones who were bigger than me. Yeah. But I can't protect everyone. Yes. The best way to protect people is to empower them, to enable them to become who they're meant to be. Does it make sense?
Say that again.
The best way to protect people is to empower them. So they become self-sufficient, self-reliant, and they begin to believe in themselves, and they find their path and their way forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I was going to ask you that, like, as a big guy who's been around violence and maybe that's been the protection method in the past, how does that pass over to us in recovery, being a protector in a mindful way, for our children and their children?
Sitting with people, journeying with them, loving them unconditionally. I realized the key to change people is to be there and to love them unconditionally, because I remember I once went to a meeting, right, to a group, as an NA group. Yep. And we're having a bit of a general discussion, and there was a guest and a facilitator, and he sort of asked, what is your purpose in life? What is your purpose in life? And I wasn't listening. I was chatting to someone next to me, a WOG thing, ADHD. And he sort of asked me, and I felt like saying, fuck off, you bastard, putting me on the spot. And I said, well, he put me on the spot and I felt angry, but then I thought, what is my purpose in life? And I remember in that moment responding by saying, to change the world. He sort of smirked and goes, so how are you going to do that? I said, one person at a time.
Yeah.
He goes, can you elaborate? I said, well, I was lost. I was an asshole. I was selfish. I was aggressive. I didn't give a shit about people. But someone showed me respect. Someone loved me unconditionally. Someone journeyed with me. Someone taught me a different way of being, changed me. So I'm going to pass that on.
Yeah.
One person at a time. We make the world a better place by journeying with people, helping them to believe in themselves, being a shoulder to lean on, to cry on in those moments, but passing on what we have learnt. For me, it was adopting or teaching the way of the warrior, being courageous. What is courage? For example, courage is facing the fear and doing it anyway, right?
Yeah.
Now, I remember when those boys beat me up in year 7. Okay, I'll just give you a little bit of an example. So I remember thinking I was totally weak and a piss-weak coward when they beat me up and hospitalised me. I remember finally sharing that with a counsellor. And it was a woman. And she said, actually, that was a very courageous thing you did, because what had happened early in the day, I was walking to the toilet and I saw these 2 big boys coming towards me. I was year 7, they were year 9. And one of the guys yells at me and said, yeah, fucking Dago, duh.
Yeah.
And I sort of looked at, sorry, me? And next minute, bang, he punched me in the face again and again. He must have hit me half a dozen times, and my head's just bouncing back. And I hear laughter. And then a teacher stopped the fight. And while the teacher's taking him to the office, he said, meet me at the mound. This is where they used to, all the bad boys used to hang around after school.
A mound somewhere.
Otherwise, I'm going to come and get you and you're fucked, Yeah. And so this was morning recess. This happened, right? So at lunchtime, I went home for lunch and I thought, I'm going to run. I remember actually packing my little bag, and I put a loaf of bread in there and some peanut butter. It's like peanut butter. No knife to spread it or anything like that. I thought maybe I can live in the bush, for a while. And my heart was palpitating. I thought, I'm going to cop it. And I decided, no, I'm not going to run away. I'll go back to school.
Yeah.
And all that afternoon, I sat in class, sweating, and my heart was going boom, 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 boom. And the clock, it ticked ever so slowly. And I remember being told off a couple of times for not paying attention to class. And then the bell went, right? And everyone went home and I stayed in class, and then I slowly made my way to where all the
to the mound.
To the mound, because they were excavating and putting in these underground pipes, sewage pipes. So they created this sort of valley, and it's called the mound. There's just big, like a valley of piles of dirt. That's where all the bad kids used to hang out, right?
And so that was your courage that you were able to...
It took me ages to get there. I'd stop and sit on a bench, and I'd just be panicking and I'd be sweating, and I thought, no, I'll go there. And I finally walked into this valley and I looked out of place. I was like a daggy, dorky little year 7, and they're all tough kids smoking, And as I walked into the entrance, they all looked at me. Everyone stopped talking. And the guy who was the one that hit me in the face, the reason why he did that, I found out later, is because he was beaten up by another Italian guy who looked just like me, who I knew, a boy, his age, but put him in his place. And so he thought he'd beat up the little brother. He thought I was the little brother because we looked like each other, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I went into that place, into that valley of death, and I said to him, look, I don't know what I've done to offend you, but I'm really sorry. And he just said, shut the fuck up. And he just started to beat the crap out of me.
Yeah.
Then I remember pushing him and he fell over in self-defense. And next minute I felt a knee in the back of in the back, and over I went. And next minute on the ground, and everyone's kicking me and punching me. And someone jumped on my arm because it felt crooked and snapped and broke and dislocated. It was a mess. And they didn't care. They just, I'm screaming in pain. So, yeah.
Yep.
So I entered that situation. So I realized courage is not about having the strength to... For now, if I were to walk in that situation, even though I'm 68, I can still handle myself, right? I've walked into very dangerous situations, but I've got a sense of... It's not really courage. It's more like an awareness that I'm able to handle myself. So often courage is about doing things that you feel you don't have the capacity to do, but you do it anyway. Like I went back to school to educate myself. That took incredible courage because I had a learning disability. I hated school. So I had to put aside my aversion towards, so courage. Also, courage to step away from certain substances that make you feel better.
Yes.
The way of the warrior is also about diligence and self-control. So I needed to gain self-control. So if you begin to train, engage, just getting up and making your bed, not sleeping in, getting up early, doing your exercises, doing your push-ups, doing your sit-ups, doing your chin-ups. I did that religiously, no matter, hail, rain or shine, as they say. So that's self-discipline in the physical, and also studying, learning how to read and write in the mental, began to spill over into other areas. As you gain control in little things in your life, you have greater capacity to control those urges to use when they re-emerge. And also to acknowledge it is just a feeling, and feelings lie.
Yeah.
Feelings lie. Feelings come and go. Does that feeling serve the greater purpose of what I'm committed to? So I became committed to becoming a martial arts champion, which I did, a powerlifting champion, which I did, but more importantly, to be a father for my kids, to not be an absent father, and to be a great ex-husband.
Yeah.
My wife recently said to me, my ex-wife, she said, "You're a shit husband, but you're a fantastic ex-husband." And that's
because you're making amends.
I'm making amends. You need to fix up the things that you take responsibility. Another attribute of the warrior is take ownership and responsibility for your actions. All our actions have consequences, and our actions will define who we become and where we end up. So I needed to go and apologize to certain people.
That concludes part 1 of Joe's story. Please tune in for part 2, which will be released tomorrow, where we touch on the power of change and forgiveness and some more incredible stories from the man himself. Thanks for joining us today. Hi, I'm James. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Please note that Slaying Sober podcast is an active service with no monetary reward. I intend to keep it this way. If you've enjoyed this, please rate on your chosen platform, tell your friends, or follow us on Instagram at Slaying Sober Pod. Your support is appreciated, and I feel the love. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us today on Slaying Sober. If you're sober curious, in addiction, or know someone who could benefit from listening, please share this episode with them. Jump over to Instagram and say g'day at Slaying Sober Pod, and follow us on Spotify to hear the latest episodes come out. Until then, keep slaying sober.